Visionaries, 1902 to 1931. Introduction. Movies are so much a part of today's culture that it is hard to imagine a time when they weren't there at all. It's hard, too, to appreciate the awe felt by the public of the 1890s at seeing movie pictures for the first time, as ghostly figures came to life before their eyes. From a 21st century viewpoint, however, the real shock is how far those movies changed in the next 3 decades, quickly evolving into gorgeously vivid feature movies. Magic on screen. For the early filmmakers, there were no masters to learn from. Some had a background in theater, others in photography. Either way, they were breaking new ground, and none more so than Georges Méliès. As soon as this sometime magician had begun entertaining the French public with movies, he looked for ways to make them more splendid and spectacular. In America, too, visionaries were at work. Their cinema thrived thanks to the likes of Edwin S. Porter, a former electrician who ended his 1903 feature, The Great Train Robbery, with a gunman turning toward the camera and appearing to fire at the audience. Other filmmakers had grander plans. A few years later, Porter was approached by a fledgling playwright who hoped to sell him a script. Porter turned down the script but hired the young man as an actor, and that same young man, the gifted and still controversial D.W. Griffith, later became a director himself, helping to father the modern blockbuster. Movies as art. Although the pioneers clustered in France and America, it was in Germany that the movies first became art. In the aftermath of World War I, a country mired in political and economic chaos gave rise to a string of masterpieces whose influence still echoes today. The silent era was filled with some of the most glorious, pristine filmmaking that cinema would ever know. The works of Robert Wiene, F. W. Murnau, and Fritz Lang. Yet even then, it wasn't just directors who deserved the credit. Take the giant Carl Freund, a huge man with an equally vast knowledge of cameras who would become a master cinematographer, strapping the camera to his body and sighting it on bicycles to revolutionize how a movie could look. Painters were also drawn to the screen, and in 1929, the famed surrealist Salvador Dali worked with a young movie fanatic named Luis Buñuel on the eternally strange Un Quien Andalú. Dali then stepped away from movies, but Buñuel continued making iconoclastic movies into the 1970s. There were revolutionaries of the political kind. In Russia, cinema was embraced as the art form of the people. Movies became key to the global battle for hearts and minds. Hollywood begins. Back then, back in America, the cinematic hustlers became the first studio bosses of Hollywood. They built their businesses on stars such as Rudolph Valentino, Douglas Fairbanks, and Greta Garbo. The biggest stars were clowns. In all of the wonders of the silent age, it is the comedies that most reliably delight today. In Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, Hollywood found two true geniuses who had honed their craft in American vaudeville and British music hall and now worked their magic on camera. Masters of mime, slapstick, and pathos, they could make audiences laugh just by looking at them. They were also meticulous filmmakers with a taste for innovation. If one person defined the early movies, it was the phenomenally famous and endlessly ambitious Charlie Chaplin. By the end of this era, sound arrived. It was 1927 when Al Jolson declared in The Jazz Singer, "You ain't had nothing yet!" But Chaplin's love for silent movies was such that he kept making them, and in 1931, with City Lights, he made one of the very greatest. By then, he had already helped the movies claim their rightful place, where they still are today, in the center of people's lives. Charlie Chaplin and I would have a friendly contest. Who could do the feature film with the least subtitles? Buster Keaton.